Welcome to Nobilis Erotica, the best science fiction and fantasy erotica anthology podcast in the known universe. This month, Gay Magical Realism. This is episode 499. I am Nobilis Reed. Our author, J Aster, is a queer writer and lover of all things mythic. When they're not writing in cafes over endless cups of black tea, you can find them learning a new art, medium, recipe, or language. Bitter Luck is their second piece in Nobilis Erotica. You can find them on Tumblr at J Aster Writes. Our narrator is yours truly. Here we go. Bitter Luck by J Aster. Narrated by Nobilis Reed. Basilio the shaman lived in a modest but comfortable house along the road to town. Yavi was his lover, a shaman in his own right. His main work was as an artist, but when a poor soul desperately needed a luck potion, Yavi could be persuaded to provide. Basilio rose with the dawn, Yavi's side of the bed already cold. Cool, humid air blew in through the windows, and the taste of the forest seeped in. A storm later. He rolled out of bed and pulled on his bathrobe, leaving it untied, and meandered into the kitchen. Yavi was there, standing at the window and watching the sunrise on the banks of their cool river, brushing a paintbrush softly against his pensive face. Yavi's brown skin was the color of wet sand on the banks of that very river. He was lean where Basilio was fat, features gentle where Basilio's were strong. When he heard Basilio come into the kitchen, he turned to watch his lover, appreciative eyes going to the rolls of Basilio's bare belly under his robe. "Come here," Yavi demanded, stretching out a hand. Basilio laughed and headed to the counter instead. "Good morning to you, amor. Can't I have a cup of tea first?" Yavi narrowed his eyes, continuing to stroke the paintbrush along his face, while Basilio poured hot water into a mug. On the counter were ingredients for one of Yavi's luck potions. Anaconda vertebrae, secret herbs, and essence from a jungle spirit. Yavi had had a busy night. Setting his tea down to steep, Basilio finally wandered over to Yavi, greeting him with a deep morning kiss, the stubble of their chins rasping together. Yavi said, eyes slipping closed. Like the ripple of a current, he sank to his knees, sucking the skin of Basilio's stomach into his mouth while he tugged his shorts down, Basilio's morning wood bopping up against the column of his throat. "Ah, love," Basilio sighed, stroking his hair. "How are you this eager so early in the morning? Not that I'm complaining." Yavi nuzzled his way down to the crease of his thigh. "I've been up for hours, lazy." "It's dawn," Basilio pointed out. "Not all of us are half nocturnal." Yavi sucked the tip of Basilio's cock into his mouth, and Basilio groaned appreciatively. He released it to murmur, lips brushing tender skin maddeningly, "I'll be painting all day, and then someone will be stopping by for a luck potion tonight. Hush now." "Yes, love," Basilio acquiesced, humor in his voice. He stopped teasing, quieted until all that came from his mouth were appreciative groans, as Yavi took him into his mouth, his throat, sinking to the base of his cock with the ease of a fish slipping into water. The draw and press of his lips and throat set a rhythm of pleasure from lips to skin, body to body, until Basilio came like the first rain after a drought, Yavi moaning as he drank it down. "So lovely, amor, so perfect," Basilio murmured. Yavi rose up to nuzzle lovingly into his neck, sighing out, "Love, your tea. It's oversteeped." Basilio rolled his eyes and didn't release Yavi, slipping his hands under the back of his shirt to stroke from his waist to his shoulder blades up and down. "What are you thinking, Basilio?" Yavi murmured. "Mi amor." Basilio pressed a kiss to the side of his head. "Have you ever taken one of your luck potions?" Yavi stilled in his arms. The paintbrush came back up to his face. He hadn't let go of it, apparently, and Basilio had to stifle a laugh. "Once," Yavi said softly. "Just once." When? It was the day I met you. Part 2. The luck potion burned bitter in the back of Yavi's throat. He had never taken one of his own creations before for fear that the indulgence would somehow backfire, but now he did, out of desperation. "What are you running from, Javier?" His father's voice rang in his head. "Listen to reason. You think I'll tolerate having a faggot for a son? Just let me fix this." Yavi had shoved the potion into his pocket and took the bus into the city, unable to breathe. He drank it in the shadow of a market stall, the bitterness of the herbs stinging his throat. 30, and still unable to shake the yoke of his father. 30, queer, half an artist and half a shaman, with nowhere else to go. The potion calmed his nerves. He made his way out into the market and picked up a basket of plantain chips and a bottle of soda, and wandered to the art vendors, spying for true talent. He picked it out in a few places, gratified to see the burgeoning artists. It made him feel less alone somehow. Eventually he passed into the area of the market not many frequented, though one he was no less familiar with. Wizened elders called out the freshness and quality of their ingredients, rapid fire and competitive. He stopped at a stall to examine what were advertised as anaconda bones. An incredibly fat man beside him was haggling with the owner over a set of vertebrae. Taking a sip of soda, Yavi wandered over to him. "Don't bother," he said, rather loudly. "They're rat." The owner spluttered in outrage while the huge man turned to Yavi. He had strong, pleasant features and good-humored green eyes that appraised him quickly. "Are they?" "Yes," Yavi said. "Aren't they?" he asked the seller. "How dare you?" "That answers that, I suppose," said the man. "Thank you, friend. Walk with me?" "Why not?" They pushed through the crowded street together. "I am Basilio," said the man, "and though I may have just shamed myself through ignorance, I am in fact the shaman of my town. I just usually cure with herbs and smoke, not animals. But a girl I know needs a luck potion, so I thought—" "Think nothing of it," Yavi said. "I make luck potions myself. My name is Javier." "Are you a shaman?" Yavi snorted. "I'm not a shaman, my friend. Half of one, if anything." "Half of one?" asked Basilio. "And half of what else?" "Half an artist," Yavi said. "And those two halves have amounted to nothing." "They still could," said Basilio. The man smiled at him, a wide white smile. "Perhaps it is the place that is stifling you. I can tell that you have talent of some kind, friend. Considerable talent." "How exactly can you tell?" Basilio shrugged. "It's in my gut." "Ah, sizable indeed, then." Basilio laughed heartily, slapping Yavi on the back. The place he touched sent a flood of warmth through him, and a prickle of possibility burned through Yavi's bad mood. "Will you help me find the right bones, then?" Basilio asked after a moment. "The girl I know, she needs some luck. Badly." Why not?" Yavi said again. "Though I've never seen any around here. But there's a first time for everything." He finished his soda and threw it into a trash can. "Come along, brother shaman, unless—" "Unless?" Basilio asked curiously. Yavi tilted his head toward an overgrown lot nearby. "That gate doesn't lock." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh," Basilio said, eyes narrowing in realization. "Now that I have to see." Grinning, feeling as mischievous as a teenager, Yavi led him away from the market and into the abandoned lot, shutting the broken gate behind them. Within the brick walls was a field of junk, rusting and occasionally rustled through. Yavi took Basilio's hand and led him to the far corner, behind a stack of deflated tires. "Let's be quick," Yavi murmured. "This place sees frequent use." "So I see," Basilio murmured, wrinkling his nose at a used condom on the grass nearby. "Don't worry, I can be fast." He winked and crowded Yavi up against the wall, getting both their cocks out with such efficiency that Yavi hardly realized what was happening. Basilio gripped them both easily in a wide fist, and Yavi tipped his head back against the wall, grunting in appreciation. Basilio's lips came down along his throat, teeth scraping and sucking, and Yavi tilted his head and reached out to cross his wrists behind Basilio's neck, humming at the sensation. "Ah, Basilio," he moaned. "Basilio!" "Sweet Javier," whispered Basilio in his ear. "So lovely. This must be my lucky day." He stroked them both deftly, Yavi's head spinning at the feel of his cock pressing into Basilio's, of his foreskin rubbing back and forth with Basilio's grip. He came as easily as breathing, whimpering as Basilio continued to fist him against his own cock, until he came too, his fist covered in their cum. Basilio laughed and flung his hand away from them both, shaking Spunk off while Yavi got his feet under him. "Good thing I carry hand sanitizer, Basilio winked, and Yavi thought desperately he could have gone again if Basilio had asked. Part 3. In the end, they didn't find the vertebrae, but Basilio wasn't downtrodden. He was in the market for quite a few things he informed Yavi he was unable to find at home, which was about 3 hours away by bus. He jovially informed Yavi that he enjoyed the bus because he took up a whole seat due to his girth and thus didn't have any busybodies crowding him in. He told Yavi about the girl who needed to get away from her mother. Eventually, they left the market and began to wander through the streets, the encroaching evening bringing some relief from the heat. Half of Yavi's mind turned towards another mutually satisfactory encounter before the day was out, but Basilio turned out to be in more of a talkative mood. "Do you cure?" he asked Yavi, "in addition to brewing luck?" "Sometimes," Yavi said, "though what most people here want they also hate me for. Women come to me for faithfulness amulets and their husbands for spells of secrecy. No one ends up happy." "What nonsense," Basilio huffed. "You should move yourself. Get somewhere you're appreciated." Yavi laughed dully. "Ah, my friend, you have touched on a sore subject, and the reason I was in the market today to run into you." "Oh?" "I fear I will never get out," Yavi said. "My father has tied me to this place. I have no resources, nowhere to go." "How has he tied you so?" Yavi shrugged. "I am complicit as well, I suppose. My money goes to him for his medicine, and he has arranged a marriage that he knows I despise. He hates both my halves, the shaman and the artist, but I find myself unable to get free of him." Basilio was silent, his face creased with worry. "I'm sorry, friend. I've said too much," Yavi said. "We have only just met, and yet I feel a comfort in your presence." "I feel the same," Basilio said. He caught Yavi's eye, and a shiver of something electric went up Yavi's spine. "But tell me, why do you despise the match he has made? Is the woman cold-hearted?" "I couldn't care less about the woman, as I hope you've gathered," Yavi said, "except for wishing her the same freedom. I'm afraid that's the other reason my father resents me." "Ah," Basilio said. They walked in silence for a while longer. The sun was starting to go down, and Yavi's unease was returning. They came to a bridge over a river. The water was a stunning pale green. Abruptly, Basilio stopped walking and faced Yavi. "Friend, I have followed my gut my whole life. It has made me the shaman I am and brought me the good fortune and wealth I have. Right now it is urging me to act even as my mind says it is too presumptuous. You need an escape while you get on your feet. You have talent, that much I feel. I have a spacious house and money to spare in a place where your talents would be respected." Yavi stared at him. "Basilio, tell me I am misreading your offer." Basilio's gaze was entreating. "I ask absolutely nothing in return, other than the satisfaction of having helped a good man in need." Yavi brought his hands to his hair, gripping it tightly. Hesitantly, softly, one of Basilio's reached up and loosened his grip, catching his hand. "In the day I have known you, I have felt the possibility of something vast. Don't let your father throw your life and talent away. Accept my offer." Yavi breathed hard. He clutched his hair in one hand and Basilio's palm in the other. The herbs of the potion seemed to rise back up his throat, filling his mouth with bitterness. Part 4. With shaking hands, Yavi fumbled open his front door. His father sat in the kitchen nursing a beer, watching him silently as he walked into his room. He began gathering his things. Art supplies first, piled into a box, and then his most precious curing tools. A luck potion for Basilio's friend, though he hadn't asked. His father came to stand in the doorway as he started in on his clothes, hiding the potion beneath. "What are you doing?" his father asked. Yavi didn't respond. "I said, what the fuck are you doing?" His father barged into his room, up to Yavi's chest, pushing him back. Yavi looked at his father. "What does it look like? You've given me no choice. I'm leaving." "You can't leave!" His father's face was incandescent. "Think, son! How will I get my medicine? You'll leave your father to die?" Yavi steeled his heart. "You can work yourself. And I'm sure you have some of my money saved up. Or go to your brother's. But I'm leaving. Now. You won't have to tolerate me any more." He placed the last of his folded clothes on top of his paints and looked around the room. "Where'll you go? You have nowhere, no one. You know what happens to people like you on their own. You'll be dead on the road in a week." There was nothing else he couldn't live without. He hoisted the 2 boxes into his arms and walked out, his father trailing behind him. Basilio's silhouette waited at the end of the street. "I do have someone now," he told his father. "You've only had me for 30 years. Now find your own way." He walked down the road to Basilio, who took one of the boxes from him silently. Yavi looked back once to see his father framed in the light of the doorway, stooped, silent. For half a moment he wavered. Then he shook himself, turned toward the man who had saved his life, and hurried to catch up. The bitterness had faded from his tongue at last. Part 5. Basilio really meant it when he said he would ask nothing in return of Yavi. He installed Yavi in the guest bedroom of his rather nice house, gave him the password to the computer and showed him how to use the remote to the TV, and proceeded to be the model of a friendly roommate, heady encounter in an abandoned lot notwithstanding. 3 months into this stalemate, Yavi wandered into Basilio's bedroom in the middle of the night and shook him awake with a soft hand on his shoulder. Basilio blinked up at him. "Yavi?" "I'm going to the river to watch the spirits," Yavi said. He jerked his head toward the door and raised an eyebrow. Basilio followed him to the bank of the river near the house, the cool air wrapping around them both. Yavi cast a glance back at Basilio, then took off his shorts and slid naked into the slow-moving water. Goose flesh erupted on his skin, but he forged on until he was shoulder-deep in the middle of the stream. "Come on," he called softly to Basilio, who had been watching him enraptured. He looked away as Basilio stripped and watched the night fish swim softly down the stream. Basilio came to him, and where the water was chest-height on Yavi, it only came up to the top of Basilio's stomach. Basilio's nipples were hard in the cold water, and Yavi shivered and raised his gaze to Basilio's face. But that made him shiver too. "What are we doing here, Yavi?" asked Basilio softly. "I am greeting the spirits of the river," said Yavi. "Now hush." Basilio fell silent, and Yavi turned his back to him, facing downstream. The spirits came quickly, little glimmers of light flashing backwards in the water, rushing past the fish as they swam against the current. Yavi began to whistle, greeting them, wishing them a safe journey. They came, slowly and then quickly, silver fish skimming down the water as he urged them on. First 5, then 10, then 100 silver lights surged past. He heard Basilio gasp as the water was illuminated from within, bright, then brighter, then dimming as the spirits passed, until only the moon and stars glowed on the water. Satisfied, he turned to Basilio and stared. The other man was gazing at Yavi as if seeing a miracle, and in that moment, Basilio's gaze near worshipful, and the cool water lapping at his body, Yavi could no longer contain himself. He reached up and slipped his wet hands under Basilio's dry hair, pulled his head down, and kissed him softly. And Basilio was still for that meeting of their lips, and then he responded, one large hand resting against Yavi's face and the other at his waist under the water, as they kissed and kissed. Yavi drew back to breathe, and Basilio brought him against him, their chests touching, knees knocking, and pressed open-mouthed kisses across his face and down his neck and collarbone. He was murmuring something. He was murmuring Yavi's name. It took almost nothing for Yavi to lift himself into Basilio's arms and take his cock inside his body, shockingly cold from the water in that hottest part of himself. He wound his arms around Basilio's neck and ground himself in little circles, keening as the head of Basilio's cock ground into his prostate. "Yavi, Yavi," Basilio moaned, clutching him close. "Oh, amor." "Make love to me," Yavi whispered, and Basilio obeyed him. hands shifting to his thighs to lift him up and down on his cock, sloshing the water between them. Yavi's back arched in ecstasy, and Basilio bent to suck one of his nipples into his mouth, biting gently down around it, and Yavi came between them, his seed washed away by the waves they were making. "My love," Basilio said again, "my love," and said it again and again as he came inside Yavi, heat spreading like a forest fire. Yavi clutched him close and smiled. Part 6. "You saved my life that day," Yavi mused, brushing the paintbrush along Basilio's neck, "the day we met." "No," Basilio said. "I think you did that, amor." Perhaps it was a joint effort. Yavi laughed, and, as all of his laughs were, it was the sweetest sound Basilio had ever heard. "In any case, here we are. Did you know, those 7 years ago, that the man you invited into your home would never leave?" Basilio smiled down at him. "No, amor. I only hoped." And that's our story. Remember to pick up Monster Whisperer 2nd Class in your favorite ebook retailer or on the Riverdale Avenue Books website, or pick up the audiobook on Audible, Amazon, or Apple. Your support will help ensure this series continues. You have been listening to the Nobilis Erotica podcast. The music is composed and performed by Mass Relay. This podcast is released under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives license. Until next time, listen hard.